Welcome into AA Baseball on WIUX B-Side, October 17th, Episode 5. After the break, we'll be recapping some of the divisional series and one that's still going on, looking ahead to the NLCS matchup coming up next. You're listening to AA Baseball at the top of the hour. We'll be right back.
Welcome into AA Baseball. Alex Hynes here with Adam Oppenheim on WIUX B-Side, October 17th. And looking at this day in baseball history, take you back to the 70s. Let's talk about the Pittsburgh Pirates. On this day in 1971 and 1979, the Pirates clinched their last two World Series titles, their fourth and fifth in franchise history, both coming in winner-take-all Game 7s. In 1971, it was a clutch homer from Roberto Clemente, and in 79, it was Willie Stargell, two Hall of Famers who urged their team to World Series titles, and they haven't won one since that 1979. Tough look for Pirates fans. Also, though, one other one to mention, 1989, San Francisco, Game 3 of the World Series between the Giants and Athletics, the Bay Area World Series, that was disrupted due to an earthquake in the area, which occurred on this day, and they postponed the game, and there was a break in the series as they had to deal with the aftermath of that. We also have a trivia question for you today. Adam and I both don't know the answer yet. It's sealed away in an envelope over here. You can tweet at us your responses at AA Baseball or myself at Hynes AS with your guesses. We'll reveal them late on in the show, along with our guesses. Question for today. The Astros continued their streak of 6 straight League Championship Series appearances, which is second most all-time in Major League history in consecutive appearances to a League Championship Series. Which team has the most? One more time. The Astros have now reached 6 straight League Championship Series, second all-time. What team is first all-time? Bonus points if you guess when it was. So we'll reveal that later in the show. But for now, let's go on to our normal discussion, regularly scheduled programming. Adam, let's talk about the Division Series matchups. We can talk about how people have felt about this whole postseason, how it's been organized. We can talk about that later. Let's just talk about what happened in these matches. Let's start in the National League, because that's where all these surprises happened. Phillies and Braves. I mean, that was a big surprise. The Philadelphia Phillies, they're for real.
Yeah, and it was really their bats getting hot for excluding Game 2. And in Game 1, they got on top of Max Fried early, which we haven't seen a lot. You know, he's been so good. You mentioned how last year he was pitching in a World Series game, a couple of them. It was super important to their run last year, but the Phillies, boy, once it got back to Philadelphia and it was 1-1, it was an electric atmosphere. We talk about the Mariners breaking a drought. The Phillies also broke a drought for having, the first home game in, I think it's 11 years. And Rhys Hoskins, that home run in Game 3, that was one of the most electric moments I've ever seen in my entire life.
I mean, the bat slam, every part of that was amazing. I mean, the emotion that you got in Philly, as a neutral, you felt it, and you enjoyed it. We could talk about Josh Naylor last night as well. These teams that are just young and excited bring a whole new atmosphere. And I mean, Philadelphia does postseason baseball very well. Watching those games that were in Philly, that was just a sight to behold. Watching those games as well, Game 3 and 4. I mean, for me, we talked at the end of last episode. It was rapid fire things to watch in this game. The things I talked about, highlighting the back of the Phillies' rotation: Syndergaard, Ranger, Suarez. They ended up bullpenning those games a little bit. It was Game 1, Ranger Suarez. Game 4 was Noah Syndergaard. But they both pitched well. I think Suarez went 3 1/3, Syndergaard went 4. But they both pitched really well and handed the ball off to the bullpen. I mean, Sir Anthony Dominguez, coming off of an injury that was absolutely botched by Phillies management and front office, whoever was controlling that, ended up having to get surgery. And it was really poorly run. Comes out firing him, Brad Hand. I mean, they don't even have David Robertson, who they traded for to be their closer. He's out for the rest of the postseason, presumably. I know he's not on the roster right now. I mean, they've cobbled together some really good pitching. they've got the front two in the rotation. If these guys can perform, I mean, hey, could the Phillies go to a World Series? I don't know. We could talk about that later. But, I mean, the pitching.
Yeah, the pitching is unbelievable. But I think what I mentioned was a key was other batters stepping up. And Castellanos did that big time. It seemed like, they would get to 2 outs and they would just really start hitting the ball. And that was huge for the Phillies to keep on tacking on runs. Harper was terrific in the series. Realmuto was very solid. Hoskins had a couple of big hits. Also had some bad defense, but, you have to take that with Rhys Hoskins at first base. But for the Braves, Riley was really not good in the series. Harris was not good. They're relying on those guys, and they just didn't look like they were creating many opportunities even at all. They were getting like solo home runs, but it doesn't do good when you're already down 4 or 5 runs at the beginning of a game.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned sort of the struggles on offense. Harris, 1 for 14. Swanson, 2 for 16. Austin Riley, 1 for 15. That's not good. You can't deal with that 3 of your big bats. I mean, Matt Olson, Acuna, and d'Arnaud, they hit. You can't really fault them offensively, actually. But the rest of those bats, the rest of the lineup was not good. And you need to have a good, 1 through 9, really, in your batting order. I mean, you could also talk about the rotation. I mean, Max Fried apparently had his attempt at a flu game, and, well, he's no Michael Jordan, let's say that. Spencer Strider, 26 days, I think it was, since he last pitched. They held him out of a final start. And, I mean, we can talk about Tony Gonsolin, who had a very similar outing off of injury as well. Morton didn't show his playoff strengths like he had before. I mean, that just shows how you have to be on your game. I mean, they shouldn't use those as excuses, and I don't think they are. But, I mean, those play a part. I just like the fact that you look at the stat lines on who had scoreless pitching outings in the postseason for them. Kyle Wright in his 6 scoreless innings in Game 2. Hey, they won them a game. Jackson Stevens with 1 inning of scoreless baseball. The only other pitcher the Braves threw out there that finished the division series with an ERA of 0. They just couldn't get solid production from the rest of their team, and that cost them. And Phillies are hot, and you wonder they're gonna be 2 games at least in Philly. That's a great atmosphere you're gonna have. And for the Braves, it's not good enough for a team that worked so hard to get to that point in the postseason with that late win streak.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to bring up also playing in the wild card series, how much of that advantage it could have if that team moves on, like the Phillies did, playing a couple games and getting warmed up while the Braves are just hopping right into postseason play, especially in a best-of-5 series, which really doesn't happen in any other sport. But you get right in there. First game is so important because if you lose it, you lose a couple more and you're already going home.
Yeah, and that's the thing about 5-game playoff series. We'll talk about that later, but I mean, hey, you got to win Game 1. They couldn't, even if they won by winning Game 2, they gave themselves a chance. But you had to win 1 game out of Philly at least, and they just couldn't. Let's talk about the other side. Let's talk about the Padres and the Dodgers. I mean, that was the most anticipated playoff series we've had in a while. I mean, if you talk about anticipated division series matchups, I mean, you could go back years and not find one this highly anticipated between 2 division rivals. And you know what? I will say, for the fact that the Padres were the better team for the whole series, it was still a series that didn't disappoint in terms of the action and the excitement that came with it.
Yeah, and you just felt like the Dodgers were going to finally, turn on some of their hitting powers like they did in the regular season where they could easily just have a huge inning. And it never happened in this series. The big inning really came from the Padres in the 7th inning to close it out in Game 4, but their best hitters struggled. Betts, if your leadoff guy's struggling, that is really tough. Betts was not good. Smith was not great. Justin Turner was not good. Trace Thompson, I know I predicted him as the NLCS MVP. He was absolutely terrible in the series. And on the other side, the Padres only had a couple hitters who were struggling, and they had people producing at the bottom of their lineup like Grisham, Nola, Profar, and then you combine that with Machado and Soto having a couple big hits, and that's really tough to stop.
I mean, Grisham is having a resurgence in the postseason that I don't think anybody expected. Nola is a glove-first catcher. You expect him to be, good defensively, but you don't expect him to perform the way he did. That is, you're crazy to get from the bottom of your lineup. That's how you win games, simply put. I know you highlighted Jake Cronenworth in the Wild Card Series, hitless against the Mets, I believe he was. 7 hits to lead the team in the division series, and that was huge for them. I mean, the two teams actually hit similarly. If you look at the batting averages between the two teams, both hitting around 230. And both teams were not great with runners in scoring position, but for the Dodgers, 5 for 33 with runners in scoring position. Padres were not much better, but they did it when it counts. And for a stat that's supposed to tell you how good you do in clutch situations, a little bit misleading when you look at where the Padres did it, because that game, you talk about that 5-run inning in Game 4. They just hit when they needed to hit, can cobble together a big inning, and that's what wins them the game and the series. But I mean, again, you look at that team, starting Tony Gonsolin gets an inning and a third. He gave up 1 run, only didn't look like himself coming off injury. Dave Roberts pulling Tyler Anderson early.
I don't know.
I'll give him a 50-50 on that one, but like when it comes back to bite you like that,
it doesn't look good.
Right. And I mean, this is not an infallible manager, because Dave Roberts has been known for questionable decisions in the past and leads you to wonder what his future remains to be. It sounds like he's staying around, but who knows. Trey Turner, error prone at shortstop, big errors that cost him both games. A guy who's usually okay, but for me, the big thing, bullpens. San Diego's bullpen gave up 1 run, 0.54 ERA in 4 games. The Dodgers with 3.57. Now, if you wanted to put that over a full season, sure. Put that over 4 games, not so great. You look at their guys. I mean, Yency Almonte gave up big hits in that inning yesterday, or the day before, excuse me. And yeah, it just didn't go for the Dodgers. But that Padres bullpen is scary. Josh Hader, better than ever, dare I say, after starting terribly with the team. I mean, this is a scary bullpen for the Padres, who pulled 2 of these guys out of Japan, out of obscurity. Several guys who were okay with their previous teams. They're almost out devil magicking the Dodgers when it comes to the way they've put their bullpen together behind just one superstar in Josh Hader.
Yeah, I mean, Hader, when he gets that fastball up in the zone and starts getting people to chase it, just sets up every pitch for him, no matter what he wants to do. A lot of batters are going to be swinging at it. And also, like, the base running that came into play in the 7th inning, Soto, like half stealing a base, that added to, their total. And that makes it a much different game when you're down 1 run instead of 2. But you mentioned the runners in scoring position. The Padres did capitalize in this 4th game. They were 4 for 9. Dodgers were 2 for 9. And there was always chances where the Dodgers, it felt like every game they could either get on the board or add on runs, and they kept failing to do it pretty much every inning. They were getting multiple opportunities every game, and eventually the Padres had the huge inning that just exploded after, like you mentioned, Tyler Anderson was taken out of the game. And boy, yeah, that doesn't really look great, especially if someone's under 90 pitches and 5 innings, giving up no runs, 2 hits. I mean, I understand the pitch count's up there, but also, I mean, how much do you trust the Dodgers bullpen to get 4 solid innings of work?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And honestly, when you look at the way the Dodgers played this series, they didn't play the worst when you compare it to other teams. It's the fact that when you're a 111-win team, you're not supposed to be, oh, they're not bad. You're supposed to be the best team in the playoffs. That's just how it goes. And when you don't perform up to that, there's going to be a lot of people who are not happy in your fan base, and it's obviously going to show in the future. But hey, give the Padres credit. I mean, Yu Darvish put in a good performance. People were really comparing him and Kershaw in that matchup. They pitched the exact same. Kershaw got a lot more hate than he deserves. They both pitched well. Let's just leave it at that. I mean, but talk about Joe Musgrove. The dude is pitching like an ace. Clevenger and Snell. Snell actually put up a good performance. I'd been doubting him recently, and now you wonder, hey, pitching potentially could be pitching one first or second game of that next series. I mean, I don't doubt him anymore. Moving on to the American League, Adam, if you want to go there. Let's start with the Astros and Mariners, the one series that has finished. The Astros swept it, but I feel like that doesn't necessarily give the whole perspective of the series. I think the Mariners put up a much better fight. They just couldn't close games, and because of that, they get swept. They put up a decent performance against an Astros team that we were expecting to kind of walk them pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, they were up by a couple runs in Game 1, and then Yordan Alvarez hit that walk-off. One of the worst substitutions. And the Mariners putting in Robbie Ray. And then they lost Game 2 after Yordan hit a go-ahead homer And then game 3, just madness on Saturday. It's the second straight week that I've come home from Indiana football game and a baseball game still going that was supposed to be over last week. It was the Rays and Guardians going 15. This one went to 18 innings. It was Jeremy Pena. And some of the questions about the Astros were, first of all, how did they replace Springer and how did they replace Correa? Now, Pena, he's been really solid for them. Obviously, he doesn't have the arm that Correa does because it's pretty much impossible to have that kind of arm. But Pena with a huge home run. Altuve was like 0 for 8 in that game. You were just like... And the Mariners were so close, it felt like every time. And shout out to their fans, standing up the entire game. That is incredible. Seattle deserves another playoff game somewhat soon.
And I think they will. I think if they spend the money, they've got a good basis now. They've shown what they can do, and they'll go forward. And I mean, yeah, the Astros just able to pull it off. I think they were deeper. That was their big thing. I mean, you talk about the bullpen. I mean, both bullpens pitched amazing in that 18-inning game. I mean, the Mariners, they were going to play until they got on primetime television. You want to schedule them at 3 o'clock. No, they're going to play until 9, whether you like it or not.
America's team.
Exactly. I mean, like, they played well. I mean, Robbie Ray in that first game, Scott Service, what are you doing, man? Come on. Robbie Ray, Jordan hits lefties just as well as righties. Robbie Ray was terrible against the Astros this season. Everything is telling you, please, throw anybody else. I don't care if you throw Luis Torrens, the second baseman, out there. I mean, I would throw him out there before I throw Robbie Ray. Game 2, you talked about Castillo was as your highlight. They need to win when Castillo pitches, and they nearly did. The thing is, they just got outplayed. I mean, that's just unfortunate. Game 1, you do play so well, and you get rocked by one bomb by Yordan Alvarez. Game 2, you pitch, a great 7 innings from Luis Castillo, and you get outscored, 4-2. I mean, and again, Game 3, it was a chance for them. Nothing. Just need to score 1 run, and they just couldn't. I mean, I think that was just more a testament to how deep this Astros rotation and pitching staff is. So I think, again, this is where you can see that this Mariners team, it wasn't really anything they did wrong. In my opinion, it was just they got outplayed by the better team, which is what we expected to see in the National League, and we didn't see it. I just think that's what happened. But, hey, I do want to bring up your point, though. Altuve was on skates out there. I mean, he swung at more pitches outside the zone than really anybody. I mean, more than Javier Baez, more than me if you threw me out there. Actually, that's a lie, but
you just still be taken all the way.
I mean, he should be because he was swinging at sliders like 10 feet outside the zone, and I'm like, is this the Altuve that is one of the hits leaders over the past 10 years? Is one of the best hitters, trash can or no, over the past 10 years? Evidently not. I mean, yeah, but this Mariners team will be back. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, and it really felt like in Game 1, they got on the board just so quickly against Verlander. It's like, man, this is the momentum they need. And you felt like they had it in the late innings, especially with Munoz on the mound, and then Bregman hits that homer. Bregman was really solid in the series. He's so solid, so underrated. Tucker to Gurriel. They have a lot of hitters who can produce, and for the Mariners, it felt like, they really just need one swing in that Game 3 to push it to a Game 4, but the Astros, they're so mentally tough. Luis Garcia going 5 innings. I mean, how nice is that to have a guy, out of your bullpen who can throw 5 innings? It reminded me of Nathan Valdi against the Dodgers in that game that he eventually lost. It buys your bullpen so much time. So if they lose that game and they come back and win the next game, he should get part of that win for sure for saving some of the bullpen arms, while the Mariners were just putting a guy out there, every 1 or 2 innings mostly.
And Garcia is a guy who I'm excited to see what he can do in the future. We talk about how good this rotation is for the Astros. Verlander's going to retire eventually. The dude's 39. It's going to happen at some point, even if he wins the Cy Young this year. But you look at the rest of that team. Framber Valdez has been amazing in the prime of his career, but you got guys like Christian Javier and Luis Garcia right behind him. Some young guys, Jose Urquidy, another guy who really kind of fell down a little bit this year, but still pitched really well. I mean, if they can lock these guys up for a while, this is an Astros team that you're thinking, the trivia question highlighted. They've made their last 6 championship series. They're primed to make more of them the way that this team is built. And you're thinking to yourself, man, they had to get rid of Jeff Luna, the GM, because of the cheating scandal, and yet they're somehow in a great spot. I mean, the Astros are finding a way to become the juggernaut that the Dodgers at this point wish they were.
And I feel like people talk about championship series and, going there, 6 times in a row like it's nothing. I mean, we see it with the Dodgers. You're like, you think that should be a free World Series, as some people tweeted that they don't even need to play the playoffs. If there was one time to not play the playoffs, it would be now. Just give the Dodgers the title. But, I mean, they're incredible. Through all the boos and stuff, those Mariners fans were crazy. What a fun game. And there was another fun one that followed that game, in the Guardians and Yankees, which is the only series still going on.
And that's been an interesting one. I mean, Cleveland we did not expect to be as strong as they were. The big question was, will they score runs? Well, I'll tell you what, they scored runs. They've scored, with the exception of Game 1. They lost Game 1, gave up 4. They scored 1, I believe. Yeah, it was 4-1. But they scored 4 Game 2, 5 Game 6. I've got 5. Let's restart there. They scored 6 Game 3. And scored 2 last night. They're figuring it out a bit, and they're hitting well. They're hitting .250 in the series already. I mean, talk about guys like rookie Steven Kwan, 7 hits, slap hitter. Jose Ramirez is being who Jose Ramirez should be. Had a little base running error last night, but he's finding some lucky hits and he's finding some hard hits. And he's balancing the two out, performing really well. And then you got guys like Josh Naylor, or the guy who walks up to the SpongeBob theme, Oscar Gonzalez. I mean, a breakout story in the postseason. Those are some great storylines, and I mean they're punch for punch with these Yankees right now, and there'll be a Game 5 tonight, which we can talk about. But even just like the last couple games, Cleveland, you could argue, has been good enough to be the better team and to earn their way to going to Houston.
Yeah, and they've certainly had some fortunate breaks. They've had, as many low velocity hits or exit velocity hits as anyone this postseason, but they've just been able to, slowly chip away at runs. But the problem becomes, how do they come back from big deficits? And they did it once in Game 3. It was, one of the most incredible comebacks people have, ever seen. There was a stat that was the Yankees were going in leading by 2 runs, I believe it was, and they were 167-0 in postseason history when leading by multiple runs entering the 9th inning until tonight, which was referring to Saturday, and SpongeBob Oscar Gonzalez, 3rd go-ahead hit, 2nd in the series, and they found a way to win. That was a really incredible game. But the Yankees have been able to hit homers, though, and I think that should worry Guardians fans. Obviously, there's only 1 game left, but they can just produce with 1 swing of the bat. It's so hard to see Cleveland doing that. I know they have, really solid hitters, but it seems like they need to string multiple hits together, which is much harder going against someone like Judge or Stanton or, Bader now, who's can hit the ball out of the ballpark.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing has been the 2 games that the Yankees have won, though, have both been when Cal Quantrill's been starting. He hasn't pitched as badly as it's looked at times. Game 1, I think he pitched a little bit better than the stats show. Game 4 was rough. That's fair. But, I mean, Garrett Cole on the mound on the other side, you expect that from Garrett Cole. But they've been able to win with Shane Bieber and Tristan McKenzie on the mound, even though McKenzie didn't even have the greatest of starts, but Shane Bieber was lights out. But they can't start tonight, and that's the big question. Which one's the bigger question mark here? The Guardians without one of their top 2 guys, or the Yankees without Garrett Cole on the mound, who's been their guy? I mean, tonight's pitching matchup, Aaron Savali is up against Jameson Taillon. Savali's not pitched. Taillon has only pitched in 1 game, gave up 2 runs in extra innings back at Yankee Stadium. I think it was Game 2.
Yeah, that was a terrible inning for Yankees fans. Just what they didn't want to happen. That game was wild. A bloop hit for Jose Ramirez, and then Donaldson ends up throwing the ball away at second. He gets all the way at third, and they're able to tack on another run. That was a disaster for the Yankees. Just what they didn't want to happen was Isaiah Kiner-Falefa making errors and Josh Donaldson making errors, and they both have made them throughout this series.
And Kiner-Falefa has essentially been relegated to the bench in favor of the rookie
move.
Cabrera. I mean, yeah, it's a good move. Kiner-Falefa being on that team in itself is a questionable move. Why they did that, I don't know. This is kind of like, saying you're going to get a new car and then finding out you've got, a beat-up, Chevy instead of getting, like, a new model car like a Carlos Correa, what everyone thought they were going to do. But, like, still, I think the Guardians can do it tonight. I think it's going to be a tough matchup for them, though. I mean, again, their bullpen's nice. The Yankees' bullpen has been hit or miss. Clay Holmes has been the only guy out of the bullpen, with the exception of Lou Trevino, actually, as well, who have not allowed runs out of the bullpen for the Yankees. The only problem is Clay Holmes pitched yesterday coming off of injury. He was supposed to not pitch back-to-back days at all this season, and he hasn't thus far. You figure, whatever happens, he's going to have to pitch. I mean, Aaron Boone's hand is going to get forced if they're winning.
Yeah, and the Guardians have Clase, who he pitched, I think, 2 1/3, which is the most he's pitched all season long. He's only pitched 2 like a few times this season. Karinchak they still have, who struggled a little bit earlier in the series, but they have their top bullpen arms. It's just, can they put together that start? Because you feel like if they get into late innings, it is advantage Guardians.
Absolutely. I'd agree with that for sure. I think just looking from afar, though, this is the series we'd all hoped that these other three would be. I don't think we expected this out of this series, and I speak for myself, at least, when I say I'm glad that this series has gone to 5. I'm excited for the first, winner-take-all game outside of that 3-game Mets-Padres. I mean,
wasn't that great, to be honest.
Yeah, 3-game series. The Mets got shut out. Whatever. Sorry, Mets fans. I don't mean to bring back trauma.
I mean, the best thing was, Musgrove's ear. That should tell you what you need to know.
Yeah, I mean, free ear massage if you have a shiny ear on the mound. Go figure. Anyway, but, like, this is going to be a big game, and I think there's rain in the forecast tonight. We'll see what happens. It's supposed to be tonight on TBS. I like the Guardians. I said it earlier. I think they could beat the Yankees. The Yankees are beatable. I think there's a lot of nerves, and if you're in Cleveland right now, the whole city is going to be on the edge of their seat tonight watching the game in the Bronx.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing about this series is it seems like the team in the top of the first, the away team, has really scored in most of these games. If the Guardians can do that, I think that, obviously it's going to up their win probability, but it ups it even more in this winner-take-all game, especially, facing Tyone, who they've been able to, hit well for the few at-bats they did have. It just, it silences the crowd. It gets you, in a lead with your pitcher on the mound. It's so important in Yankee Stadium, especially in a winner-take-all game. It's going to be pretty loud there, but it should be a great time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's that atmosphere, though. But, hey, Cleveland won a game in New York. The winner has to play the Astros, and that's going to be tough, especially there are rumors of this game getting pushed back to tomorrow because of rain. I don't think it's going to happen. I think they've got to play it. They've already had one game pushed back, and let me tell you, if the Guardians have a game pushed back and lose because of it, I'm sorry. I'm gonna laugh. I'm a Cubs fan. They've already endured one rain delay. The last thing they need to endure is another one. But the fact that they're gonna be without Bieber, who they would have been having likely tonight, because if that game 2 doesn't get pushed back to Friday, right? I think it was a Thursday game originally, then Friday off 2 games on the weekend.
Friday, Saturday, Sunday, correct.
If that game's on Thursday, like it should have been before the rain happened, Bieber starts game 2. He's on 3 days rest. He could theoretically start tonight. But because of that, they're having to either hope that there's a rain delay to push him back to start tomorrow against Cortez, probably would be the Yankees' counterpoint. But they're now having to go with Aaron Savali, who really did not have the greatest regular seasons. A guy who I would not necessarily say I have the utmost trust in. You could say the same for Jameson Taillon, though. But Savali's ERA is just south of 5 this season. Pitched less than 100 innings, less than 100 strikeouts. He's really not the same guy that he was a year or so ago. I think last year he had a 3.84 ERA, and easily the best year of his career, full year, with the exception of his rookie rookie 2019 where he had about half the innings. I mean, this could go any way. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, and interesting you brought up Cortez, because if that game wasn't pushed back, it might be Bieber versus Cortez. And obviously, the Yankees fans would counter with, then they would have, their number 1 or 2 in Cortez. But, the Guardians are more desperate for that pitching because they can't score runs in a flash like the Yankees can with the home run ball. And what's interesting, too, is looking back on that Jordan Montgomery-Harrison Bader trade when Bader was in a walking boom, Montgomery had all those scoreless innings. First of all, Montgomery would probably be starting in this game over Jameson Taillon, even though there was rumors that, they weren't going to use him in the playoff rotation. No, they were going to use him, especially in this spot. However, Bader's been so good in this series, at least offensively, 3 home runs. Obviously, he brings a lot to the table defensively, but it's the offense at the bottom of the lineup that has been huge. So it's a big give or take for the Yankees. I mean, if they lose the game because of Jameson Taillon, they're going to say the trade is bad. If Harrison Bader, if the Yankees win this game and Taillon pitches okay, they'll say they won the trade with Bader.
Yeah, it's important to say he's hit 3 homers, which have been huge. It's been 3 of his 4 hits, to be fair. It's not like he's been hitting completely, but he's a great defensive outfielder in center field. Hitting the homers. I mean, Montgomery did not start for the Cardinals. It's important to note in the postseason. He was supposed to be helping them to the postseason. He didn't, and didn't get postseason starts anyway. He would have been extremely helpful to have instead of having to throw Taillon tonight. Yeah. Let's take a quick break here on AA Baseball. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about this postseason format. A lot of people are up in arms about it. Let's take a moment to talk about it, and then we'll look ahead to the championship series that come up starting on Wednesday. So stick with us here on AA Baseball. Welcome back to AA Baseball. Alex Hynes, Adam Oppenheim. Adam, you referenced this a little bit ago, talking about referencing an LA Times article, which basically said pretty stupidly, you should just give the World Series to the Dodgers. Out of any year, this is the year that you just give it to them because they're so good. And, we saw how that worked out. They lost. But we're seeing people getting up in arms, and it's on Twitter. I'll take it with a grain of salt. After all, everybody's upset on Twitter about something. But people are saying, hey, we need to change the postseason format. It's terrible. It looks awful. And, it's even getting, attention from guys like John Heyman, who, albeit has his own things that you can make fun of. But he had a report where he was talking about what they need to do to try and make it a better system or whatever, and it just is really just dumb. People are trying to talk about the best team should pick their opponent. The division series should be 7 games. Okay, I can kind of agree with that. I'm not going to get into it much, but it doesn't change anything reference to what people are talking about or whatever it is. You know what I mean? It's just ridiculous. People are talking about this mainly because the Braves and the Dodgers, 2 of the 200-win teams, lost. Well, you want to look at the previous wild card format, the thing that people are pining for, you could say, or at least compared to this. Well, let's go back to 2012, the first year of the wild card game, the 1-game playoff between the wild card teams. An 88-win team, the Tigers, go all the way to they won the division actually that year, but they had 88 wins, made it to the World Series, having gotten past 3 90-win teams in the American League, lose to the Giants in the World Series, but they go all the way to the World Series. 2014, guess what? You've got 2 wild card teams in the World Series. You got the Royals and you got the Giants. Teams had 94, 96, and 98 teams. They all lost in the division series. Sound familiar? 2015. This one's, I'm stretching a little bit with this one, but the Cubs were a wild card team, beat the 100-win Cardinals, a team who had 100 wins, made it to the championship series, lose to the Mets, who were a much better, a division winner or whatnot. Granted, the Cubs had 97 wins. They really would have won almost every other division, if not every other division. And sure, you have this period of sort of standardness, 16, 17, 18. The 3 best teams arguably made, well, the 6 best teams arguably made the World Series. 3 of the best teams won. Cubs, Astros, albeit aided by trash cans, and the Red Sox. But you look at 19. The Nationals were a wild card team. Trent Grisham, hey, our old friend, helps them out by misplaying a ball in the wild card game.
That was terrible.
They go on to beat an LA team that had 13 more wins than they did. As a wild card team, the best team was the Dodgers, and then they upset the World Series team, the Astros in the World Series, and Juan Soto has a ring because of that. And then 2021, last year, the Braves. They had 88 wins. They win the World Series. So you can't pretend that this is new. And also, just one last thing. When was the last time that the 2 lower seeds in one league won their league's division series? So both lower seeds in the American League or the National League moved on to the next round to play in the championship series? That was 2019. We're not talking a decade ago. We're talking about 2019. The Cardinals and the Nats played in the championship series after upsetting the Dodgers and the Braves, who were the 2 highest win totals in the National League those years. You simply cannot complain about a system and claim it's broke when it fits your agenda. Your team lost. Deal with it, LA. If you really want to win, tell Dave Roberts not to pull Tyler Anderson or tell Mookie Betts to hit the ball better. You can't blame the format. It's not how it works. Oh my gosh. And the fact that this gains so much traction to the point national writers are talking about it does my head in.
And the problem is, the regular season's so long, and people say, oh, the Dodgers, they did have a historic regular season, but once you come to the postseason, it doesn't mean anything. And also, the interesting part about, baseball is if the away team splits those first 2 games, they got to be feeling great, having a chance to clinch at home. And that's what happened in a couple of the series. The Dodgers and the Braves, as the Phillies and Padres were able to split those first 2 games, and that was huge. The Yankees were able to stave off elimination yesterday, but boy, it's a confidence booster if that away team can win one of those 2 games.
And and the other thing that's been thrown around a lot is rest versus rust. Does having that giant break during the 3-game wildcard series, that whole weekend, aid the team that's supposed to have the advantage by getting by? Does it give them rest to get better, or does it give them rust to where they're not ready? And from an article I read by Ken Rosenthal, really pointing out that neither team that lost, the Dodgers or the Braves, really said that was a factor. We just didn't play well enough is kind of the thing. Heck, Rosenthal ends with, quote, just play better to end his article. I mean, it gets as simple as that. The playoff is not the problem. 5-game series, anything can happen. I'll give you that. I mean, that's why I really like this game so much. I mean, you look at the NBA. The NBA has an 80% chance that the best teams win.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's gone like that most years.
There's some quantification for it. That said, in order to have a series that would give you accurate results like that every time, the baseball would have to be best of 75 in order to accurately represent the NBA. I mean, you got to accept there's variance here. The best teams don't always win. That's how it is. You just got to build your team for the postseason. You can build your team for a regular season all you want. The postseason's a different animal, and when you get hot, like the Phillies and the Padres did, I mean, that's just what you do to win series. I mean, the Red Sox won 108 games, I think it was, in 2018. Won it all, just completely walked their way through it. Give them that. Well, for the most part. I guess the World Series was a different story. But, I mean, even then, they were a team that were dominant in the regular season and the postseason. You don't really see that all the time. That's an exception to the rule.
Yeah, and also, at the beginning of the year, people thought, the Yankees were going to be really hot. And now suddenly the Guardians are, hanging in there with them. And I think it did benefit them to play the Rays first, because you would have thought I know the Rays pitching is really good, but the way the Guardians would have hit if they were to hit like that against the Yankees, they would have no chance. But they've been able to come up with some clutch hits here. Judge has been terrible. We didn't even talk about him. Stanton has been atrocious.
That's rare for a postseason.
But the thing is, if they hit the home run, it is what it is. But I will say, it definitely helped for the Guardians to play before, especially in a playoff atmosphere. Their team is very young. Besides Jose Ramirez, they don't have, a ton of experience on this team, at least playoff experience.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I mean, we talk about how those things work. That's just how the playoffs work. Anyway, that I just want to end my rant there. I just saw that, and that it was kind of like you and Roger Maris. This just got me really just frustrated with the people who are trying to justify this because your team lost. Deal with it. Let's talk a little bit more about these LCS matchups. So I do want to actually bring some breaking news that has come out during the time that we've been recording. Tweets coming out saying that the league and teams, but that being the Yankees and Guardians, are meeting at 6 o'clock Eastern, so that's about 15 minutes from now, to reassess the weather for tonight in New York. We'll see what happens with that. It's raining now. We'll see if that influences the game, though there was one thing that has been announced. Shane Bieber is not available tonight, period. Savali is their guy, and Shane Bieber cannot pitch at all. McKenzie has even less rest. He's not. They're not touching him. Guardians are gonna have to rely on 6 innings from Savali, and a little bit risky there. Let's talk about the LCS. Let's talk about the one that we know. Phillies Padres. Adam, what are you looking for in this series, really?
I'm looking for, the Phillies bats to continue to step up, but they got to clean up defensively. Hoskins has made, a couple really brutal errors in this series. They got to play clean defensively because the Padres have played really good defensively. No, I think it's going to be about the star players, Soto, Machado versus Schwarber, who's really got to hit better, Hoskins, Castellanos. Because I feel like, the couple top pitchers for each team, they're going to be really good. The Phillies bullpen's shaky. Padres is really solid, but we know how quickly that can flip because we were looking at that Braves-Phillies series like, do we even need to make a prediction on who's going to win this series? We all know it's going to be the Braves. Wrong.
Yeah, I think you can't underestimate the Phillies. I mean, I still have to say that those Padres look really good right now. And I mean, again, Juan Soto didn't have his best series against the Dodgers. Josh Bell did not have his best series against the Dodgers. Trent Grisham, however, I mean, okay.
The Crone Zone.
Yeah, Cronenworth. I mean, those guys are doing fine. They need to keep it up. But, I mean, again, you mentioned Schwarber. Schwarber has 1 hit in the postseason. In what? That's 6 games? That's not good. I mean, I've been touting postseason Kyle Schwarber for a while. Eventually, he's going to do it. But they were coming up against an injured, or a beat-up, let's say, Braves pitching staff. That doesn't excuse it for the Braves, and that doesn't take away from what the Phillies were able to do. It's going to be a much different story when you're facing, 1-2 of Darvish and Musgrove. They've got Nola in the prime of his career, pitching like mad. Zach Wheeler, mainly good. He's not been as great in the postseason as his regular season, but, I mean, he's got the pedigree. I still worry. Blake Snell against Ranger Suarez. Noah Syndergaard. Mike Clevenger. That's going to make this series. Games 3 and 4 are going to make this series, I think, is the big thing. The Padres have the home field advantage, too. However, again, the Phillies get the meat of that, the middle 3 at home. Both these teams are going to have insane playoff atmospheres. Both these teams completely rocked the stadium in their last clinching games, both at home. So, I mean, that's big. Pitching is going to be so huge. I mean, I want to say the Padres have an advantage with that, but I don't really think they do. I mean, look at Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler. Put him against, I mean, Musgrove's in a different category. He's been pitching like mad, but throw Darvish, Snell in there, I don't see much of a difference.
Yeah, the pitching is going to be a very interesting battle, especially because both these teams can leave the ballpark, and they're going to score. It's going to be loud. The team that jumps in front early, you feel like they're going to have a really huge advantage. Crazy, too, with, the Padres part trying to keep the Dodgers fans out. And they're not going to have trouble this time, I would hope. Of course, it is a California team, and sometimes they merge into other teams. But, I mean, it should be fun. It should be rocking at both ballparks. Not what anyone expected, but that's just baseball.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see how those bats do against those pitching staffs. But, man, this could be a fun series. More fun than people think. People are talking about, oh, well, we don't have the Braves. We don't have the Dodgers. This is going to be fun, man. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, I really don't want to watch, Austin Riley strike out again. I mean, the Braves lineup looked terrible.
Give me Harper. Give me Soto. I mean, come on.
And give me that Hoskins
Machado?
bat slam. Just
yes.
inject that into my veins.
Yeah. Let's talk about the American League One, and then we can give a few quick fire things towards the end about these series. But let's talk about the American League. We don't know who's going to be playing the Astros. That makes it difficult for us to predict or really give any real analysis on. But let's look at this Astros team first. And, I mean, we know how good their pitching staff is. I think they're favored against whoever they play. There's no doubt about it. I mean, what do you think is going to be the catalyst for them that would see them struggle? Because I really don't see it. I mean, we've said this how many times? I don't see a way that they could really lose this series. I mean, there are ways. There are a lot of ways, but they seem so strong and so consistent.
I think it starts with their ace, or who they have as their number one. It's Justin Verlander, giving up 10 hits, 6 earned runs against the Mariners in just 4 innings. He's, not been great in the postseason, and I'm confident in their other pitchers, but can Verlander, pitch a really solid game? And I don't think it's too much of a difference who they face. Like you said, they're going to be favored. I think the Yankees will give them a little bit of a tougher matchup, but still, I like Cleveland's pitching staff better as a whole. But, I mean, the Astros, they're going to be so tough to beat. So much experience. We already mentioned Bregman. You got to think Altuve's got to get on track somehow. Alvarez, still so dangerous. They are missing a couple of those bats that, they had, like, Springer and Correa, but they've been able to, substitute some of those players. And a really good defensive catcher, Maldonado, who's trusted so much by his pitchers, even though he can't hit the ball. But they got Vasquez behind him. They're so deep, so many options, both hitting the ball, out of the bullpen. And I don't think the Yankees or the Guardians would be able to keep up with either of those, any of the depth that the Houston Astros have.
Exactly. And depth is something you can talk about now in a 7-game series. The Dodgers had one of the deepest teams in baseball. 5-game series, that means nothing. 7-game series, that's where you see depth really prevail because you got to go deeper in your starting rotation. You got to usually start a 3 and a 4 starter. You got to usually go deeper into your bullpen because guys can't pitch every night. And the Astros have a really good bullpen. They've got one of the best staffs in baseball, though. I mean, they've got some of the most strikeouts. They've got one of the lowest hits allowed. I think they've allowed the second least amount of hits, only behind the Dodgers. You look at their expected pitching stats. Their fielding independent pitching is insane. That's huge. And I mean, we talk about how much we love the Cleveland pitching staff. This is another category above, and that's saying a lot, I think, in my mind. When you look at the depth, at least the rotation.
Yeah, and Cleveland has the top guys, but behind, you have Clase and Karinchak, but the Astros have multiple bullpen pieces that they are willing to throw out when the game's on the line. We saw with the Mariners. Maybe they were, forced. Dusty Baker was forced to throw some of those people out there, but, I mean, if you throw them out in, a game that went 18 innings, why wouldn't you trust them in the middle of a game where even if they give up a couple runs, it's no big deal compared to giving up 1 run and the game's over? Yeah. And you're going to put a lot of those bullpen pieces in and trust them.
I mean, that's huge. Altuve, he's going to fix it. He should fix it at least. I mean, to be fair, you can't look more lost than he did last series. So, I mean, it's only up from here, right? Right?
I mean, you need Chapman to pitch. That's what you need.
Oh, yeah, no, of course. Unfortunately, left off the postseason roster. Or as somebody put it, if given that how the Yankees have been playing, saying, well, at least you would have blown these games earlier. You wouldn't have had to deal with them as much. But, I mean, even the Yankees, their offense is really good. The Astros' offense looks better. Jordan. Kyle Tucker has been he's been good, but he's been quiet good, who I think he can be better. Because he really hasn't reached Bregman or Jordan status. Bregman, I mean, he's a guy who was one of my breakout players for this postseason. He's done it quietly. I wouldn't be surprised if you see some of these guys perform really well. I mean, I'm going to say it right now. Framber Valdez for NLC or ALCS MVP right here in a 5-6 game series, I think. That's what I got. Yeah, I don't care who they face.
That's definitely a fair shout. But you mentioning Kyle Tucker, it seems like when he doesn't strike out, he makes just such hard contact. It feels like that's also, similar for Alvarez. in a sense. If they get that pitch, that mistake pitch on, the inside part of the plate, they can hit out. And also that left field wall, that's going to come into effect a lot. One of the shorter outfield walls. I think it is the shortest in the MLB in terms of, how high or far you have to hit. I'm not really sure what the dimensions exactly are because I know Fenway's higher, but it might be shorter, like 310-ish. But when Alvarez can hit the other way, it's tough. But also, you face the Yankees and Judge and Stanton are hanging there. That could be tough.
Yeah, it's not like these two teams haven't played enough against each other. And it's not like these two teams like each other. That makes for a very exciting championship series matchup. But, I want to see the Guardians. I want to see them pull it out. We'll see tonight, and by the time we have our next episode, we'll be in the thick of the championship series, so you really won't be able to give a full prediction on this series. But there's a lot that could go either way, a lot of moving parts. Yeah.
And then going back the last time to possible delay we have tonight. If it does get pushed back, like Aaron Boone said, he'd be willing to play a game tomorrow night. That's pretty crazy. Because then you're going to Houston the next day. But either one of these teams, if it gets pushed back, you're going to Houston the next day. That is tough.
You'd almost chalk that one up as a loss given the travel time, facing Justin Verlander. You'd get your aces. Bieber would probably start. Cortez would start if it was the Yankees. So they're 1A compared to, their top guy, Garrett Cole. But still, could be tough. Let's switch back to the National League quickly because we talked about, guys who we want to break out and our keys. Who do you think would be a breakout or MVP for the series pick for them?
For the Phillies Padres?
Yes, correct.
I think it's got to be Kyle Schwarber. You feel like he's going to be, in a 7-game series, he's going to be in a situation where a couple guys are on, where the bases are loaded, where he's going to need a homer. And he's going to deliver. I've seen it as a Cubs fan. I've seen it as a Red Sox fan. He's able to deliver in big moments, and they're going to need him to, especially out of the leadoff spot. I kind of like how the leadoff spots are trending now to those, home run hitters. It is fun to have guys like Steven Kwan, but also just when the Yankees start the game with Aaron Judge. That's pretty fun.
We could have a whole talk about this. Guys who get on base and guys who hit homers. That's the modern baseball. I would say homer hitter like Schwarber, I'd say put him in the 2, give a leadoff guy. Whatever, but you're talking about maximize how many times through the order. That's the whole reason of it. That's the whole analytics behind it. Schwarber is an amazing guy to watch hit leadoff, and I also agree with that pick. So,
yeah. But Altuve was 0 for 8, so it didn't really matter if he was in the leadoff spot at that point. It should be very interesting to see.
All right, let's with a few minutes left, let's circle back to our trivia question. So the Astros reached their 6th straight league championship series this year, which is the second most all-time in reaching consecutive championship series. Which team had the most? We had no right-in guesses today. Adam, I'll let you go first.
I'm going to go with the New York Yankees.
Okay, I'm going to go the Atlanta Braves, and because I feel so confident about it, I'm going to say the Atlanta Braves from 1993 to 1999 and say 8 years.
Yeah, that makes me think I didn't get it right when you named the years.
I'll show you. The envelope has not been opened for what it's worth. All right, let's open it and see. The answer, so close. The answer is the Atlanta Braves.
Oh.
8 straight NLCS, I got that part right. It was 1991 to 1999. It turns out I just forgot how to do math.
Ooh, well.
I got the years wrong. I thought it was the Braves. They had that whole thing. You want to talk about a team who can't complain about this year's postseason not benefiting them as a really good team? Braves fans, you endured the 90s. You can't talk. If you wanted to complain about it then, you just made it this one year, did really well, got knocked out. There was no problems then. And rant over.
Yeah, I think that's going to wrap up our show today as well. Exciting Monday, October 17th show. We'll be back next week on the 24th of October, 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss it on AA Baseball. For my partner, Alex Hynes, I'm Adam Oppenheim. You've been tuning in to AA Baseball on WIUX. We'll see you next week.